I'm Brenda Wilkins. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas, and I'm reading a short excerpt from Chapter 1 of my current project, Universal Justice. The Maryland State Penitentiary had been his home for the past 2.5 years. It was now time for him to move on. He hoped it would be to a better place. He had seen more violence in the past 2.5 years than he had in his entire 6 years as a journalist and news anchor for WLAM News in Washington, D.C. Prison, Brian Thomas had learned, was its own world, unimaginable from outside its walls, a microcosm of the worst of mankind. Violence, degradation, humiliation, and human misery reigned supreme from both sides of the aisle. Having covered stories about prison life and the state prison system, did little to prepare him for the harsh reality of being confined within this living hell. In 1984, just last year, a correctional officer was killed as he and another officer attempted to return several prisoners to their cells. The officers were attacked with sheaves by inmates. One officer was stabbed to death, and the other officer was wounded. It didn't help matters that Brian was innocent of the crime for which he had been convicted. Rape and murder in the first degree, the judge had said. He shook his head, trying to get the image of the jurors out of his mind. The daggers in their eyes, the scowls on their faces, the hate oozing from their pores. They looked at him and saw the deranged, dark, psychopathic monster that the prosecution had made him out to be. A man, not a man, an animal who brutally forced himself on a young, innocent, unsuspecting white female who worked with him as a research assistant at WLAM. An animal who then, without conscience or remorse, sliced that poor woman's throat while managing not to get a speck of blood on himself anywhere. Who, having been rejected by this beautiful young woman, flew into a jealous rage and vowed to himself that if he could not have her, no one else would. An exciting story, Brian thought to himself, but it's not even close to what actually happened. Rubbing his hands as he sat on the metal cot in his cell, the life left in his body down to mere hours and the clock ticking, he tried to fathom how fate had brought him here. He thought about the first time he sat behind the news desk at WLAM News as the first Black anchorman in the station's history. At the age of 25, he was riding high on a trajectory that was aimed to take him to the pinnacle of his career. The newspapers were already writing stories about him. They were calling him the Black Walter Cronkite. He had it all, a budding career, fame, and a beautiful woman who had just agreed to become his wife. He thought about Lisa, beautiful Lisa, with a smile that could eclipse the sun, her mesmerizing almond eyes framed with long dark lashes that could draw you in to the point of having to catch your balance. Lisa, whose pride and love of self would not allow her to straighten her natural hair. She could come up with ways to style it that caused strangers to stop her on the street and ask, "Who does your hair?" Lisa Yates, the love of his life, what was left of it anyway. Almost 3 years on death row, and he thought of her every day. He remembered the last conversation that they had when she had come to see him after his sentencing. "I can't do this anymore," she confessed with tears in her eyes. "Lisa, you know that I didn't do this." "Do I? You were there, Brian. You were in her apartment after you swore to me that there was nothing going on between the two of you. They found your semen all over her, for God's sake." Brian massaged his temples, the frustration he felt beginning to manifest itself as a headache. "I told you the truth about what happened. Why won't anybody believe me, God damn it?" He slammed his hand on the table as he stood, causing the chair he was sitting in to crash to the floor with a loud thud. Everyone in the room turned to look in his direction. The guard standing in the corner with a hand on his gun made a move towards him. Brian put up his hands to show that he was no threat, then reached down and picked up the overturned chair and sat down. Look, he continued, Shannon Edwards called me at the station. She was off that day, but she had come across some information in her research that was pertinent to the story that I was working on. She asked me if I would come by her apartment and pick it up when I got off from work that evening. Whatever else Shannon may have been, she was a damn good research assistant, and I trusted her instincts when it came to her work. When I got to her apartment, she was dressed, scantily, but she was dressed.